But will all this outrage help the left with their glaring man problem? A recent analysis shows that masculine Democrats is an oxymoron in the eyes of many young men. Most struggle to name masculine leaders within the Democratic Party outside of former President Barack Obama. I know you've been dying to talk about Sydney Sweeney all day, but tell us your thoughts on Kamala Harris's statement.
Jesse doesn't hold back here. The man problem line is a sharp jab. He's questioning whether the Democratic Party even has strong male figures anymore. And then the pivot to Sydney Sweeney? That's classic Fox. Mix politics with pop culture for max impact. They're setting up Kamala and Sydney as symbolic opposites. Power versus beauty. Failure versus success.
Well, I felt like maybe you were going to say, Dana, well done. You told us she was not going to end up running. I think I said that. But I do think that this is the best decision Kamala Harris ever made because she was probably going to lose. And I think it also shows that she is not as powerful as some people might have thought. She believed she was going to clear the field, that all the other Democrats were going to say, oh, Kamala Harris is running? Well, I guess I better step out of the way. That wasn't happening. So she was going to have to fight for that nomination and probably lose it. Because if you remember, she was the first to drop out in 2019 before there was ever even a vote cast. She spent all that, she raised a ton of money, and then she lost all the money. Her campaign was a shambles. Everybody went on the record that worked for her campaign and then carried on into the White House saying she's terrible. We have to reset this. We have to keep redoing it. Joe Biden picks her because Clyburn tells him to, and then that was a terrible thing for them all along, and then they had to do the switcheroo. She could have a great impact doing lots of other things. I do not think she will run for elected office again.
Dana doesn't mince words. She practically reads Kamala's political obituary. What's brutal here is the reminder that Harris dropped out before the 2020 primaries even began. Dana's point is that Kamala never really had the political chops, and now the Democrats are trying to quietly phase her out. The line about not running for office again, that's a career tombstone.
You can mourn your nominee, please, Jessica, and then tell us your thoughts on why your party is so crazy about Sydney Sweeney.
I will do no mourning or no craziness. I think it was the right decision for her. It would have been really tough. There were a number of meetings with high-end donors in California who they're holding their money back. So you can't win a race unless that's going to happen. Now all eyes turn to Katie Porter, who's going to be the far-left progressive candidate there. And there's a lot of buzz about whether Rick Caruso will try to get in, but a question always...
Steve Hilton.
And Steve Hilton, who's already in. Rick Caruso, I think, would be interesting, especially in light of losing the LA mayor's race and then Karen Bass's management of the LA fires. On the Sydney Sweeney front, ad campaigns are supposed to have hot people in them that make you talk about the ads and eventually buy the product. And so this is a home run for American Eagle. Stock went up 18%. They have 4 times the traffic on the website. They're part of the conversation, though I would say it is largely an online conversation. I asked a couple people who don't spend all day on their devices, well, what do you think about the potential eugenics American Eagle ad? And they were like, what are you talking about? But I think it was smart for them to use someone who's so popular right now. And I was not offended, though I also have not bought the jeans, but I still like skinny jeans, which I know is just like a millennial thing.
Jessica's trying to walk the tightrope here, defend Kamala's exit, and justify Sydney Sweeney's marketing value. But her breakdown of the American Eagle campaign is sharp. 4 times the traffic and 18% stock boost? That's what every brand dreams of. She's also subtly mocking the people who overreacted to the ad as eugenics. And yeah, that was an insane leap.
Paul loves skinny jeans. The skinnier, the better, Paul.
Particularly on, what's her name? Sydney Sweeney?
Yeah.
What's her name?
What's
that girl's name?
Good prep for today, Paul.
That's how you know you're getting older, right? You have no idea who the celebrities are. Don't say anything. All right, all right, Kamala not running. First of all, this is the equivalent of the New York Mets saying, yeah, we don't really want to win the World Series, okay? You weren't going to win. That's obviously what went into this. And really, if you think about it, the conditions that created Kamala as the Democratic rock star they couldn't have been more favorable to her, right? Because obviously you had the debacle with Joe Biden, right? And then all of a sudden, boom, she was the anointed. And I mean, you've never seen fundraising like that in so short a time. And yet it didn't work. We call that in law enforcement a clue, all right? So I agree with you, Dana. I think it was the right move. That said, I am going to say I think she has a future. She's going to have a future with the party. You know, the party likes her. She's personable. She's photogenic, all of that stuff, and that matters these days. You know, Greg, you said at one time, you know, that politics is supposed to be show business for ugly people, and it's not true in show business anymore. The reverse is also true in politics. You now have good-looking politicians, right? So I think she does have a future. That said, it's just not right now. The future's not what it used to be for Kamala. Let's move on real quick on the Sydney Sweeney front. The thing about jeans, all right? What do you think made her look like that if it wasn't jeans? Kale? She did a bunch of crunches or something and gave her those assets. It didn't go that way, all right? And just all I'm going to do is just reverse it now. And, you know, I don't mean to be mean-spirited, but come on now. If, let's say it was Beyonce who said that, right? Or if LeBron James said, no, it wasn't jeans that got me into the NBA. It's because I can do a lot of pull-ups. You know, you'd laugh, of course. It has to do with you're physically gifted. And there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is this is not about Nazism. It's about envy. And the people what realistically social media has done, and it's bad for the Democrats particularly, is that it's like Democratic, like makeup remover. There's no film anymore. There's no distance. We can see who they are. And so you get young women with purple hair and nose rings saying that Sydney Sweeney is a Nazi. Sydney Sweeney is not a Nazi. The campaign is not Nazism. And we've talked about this. Anytime you invoke Nazism, you've lost.
Paul's rant is half funny, half exasperated. He's basically calling out the absurdity of labeling beauty campaigns as fascist. His logic? If we can't admit some people look a certain way because of genetics, we've lost the plot. The Beyoncé and LeBron pull-up lines? Wild comparisons, but it drives his point. Talent and beauty don't require apologies.
Greg, I know you've been dying to talk about Sydney Sweeney.
Oh, it is quite a contrast. No one wants to see Kamala run. Everyone wants to see Sydney run. So.
That's disgusting.
Greg's cheeky and controversial as ever. Comparing Kamala and Sydney in terms of who people want to see run is classic Gutfeld. Part zinger, part social commentary. It's also a deeper jab at what he sees as the Dems' inability to inspire excitement, politically or culturally.
Let's talk about the masculinity thing. From the 1960s onward, little history lesson, Dana. Many men pretended to be liberal just to get girls. Because of the 60s and the 70s, there are a lot of cute liberal girls you can impress by, reading a summary on Karl Marx and Angela Davis. But then you realize over time that a lot of these women became more and more unhappy and less attractive. They became less like Sydney and more like Rosie. It was like, you know what? Maybe this isn't the best place to be. So the only men that are left over in the Democrat Party are authentic phonies. They've been doing it so long, they've lost their actual personality. Like Gavin Newsom, that isn't real. Eric Swalwell, that's not real. Cory Booker, he's a one-man theater troupe, The Sydney story, though, the reason why it's interesting is, and Jessica's right, that it was kind of an internet story, but then the media, who has nothing good to write about because of Trump doing so well, this is their story. So they amplified it, but it shows the vast difference in priorities between most Americans and junk food journalists. Most Americans, they're thinking about education, crime, economy, their mortgage. But these articles are generated by people, mostly women, sad, no family, no spouse, detached from actual concerns of life. So they have to create these stories that they find meaning in and that we find hysterical. They're actually the sad clowns of today. They're providing us with the entertainment and the segments we so desperately need during the summer. Then think about the anti-woke backlash right now. Everybody is laughing at this. Woke is dead. But I think it is driven by a realization that at least 1 to 3 generations were told a lie about gender, sex, and happiness. That women were told by their favorite magazines, from Cosmo to Glamour, you didn't need a man. But if you wanted a man, you could have many. And they shouldn't be like your dad. And there is no clock. You can be 25 forever. You can live this life forever. We're not going to forget you. But we do. So now you have women in their 30s and the 40s who are left behind romantically and biologically, casualties of the sexual revolution, that we're told over and over again, don't be a Sydney Sweeney, be an Elliot Page instead. So Sydney Sweeney is a reminder that women are always going to be women and men are always going to be men who like women. And the people who preach differently, celebrities and elites, they can do so because they have the status and the fame to weather whatever outcome there is for their dumb choices. But the millions of women who bought those magazines and believe that beauty is patriarchy and monogamy is a prison, they don't have that luxury. They're stuck without a safety net. How's that?
This is Gutfeld in full form, part history lesson, part rant, part cultural analysis. He's arguing that liberal men lost their authenticity-chasing approval, while women were sold a false bill of goods about freedom and fulfillment. The Rosie versus Sydney comparison? Provocative and maybe a little brutal. But his bigger point is this: the culture war has real casualties, and it's not always the ones shouting the loudest. If you made it this far, what's your take? Was Kamala's decision wise, or just inevitable? And is Sydney Sweeney just a marketing win, or a cultural flashpoint? Backhand index pointing down, drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next fiery breakdown on the 5.